When I faced my partner's hidden life, it shattered everything. It wasn't some monster hiding under the bed that destroyed my sleep, my sanity, pretty much my everything. No, it was a soft chime. Just one tiny notification on a phone that wasn't even mine, glowing there in the pitch black dark at 2:13 a.m. That little, innocent sound? That was the starting gun for my world imploding. It was the first crack that would eventually spiderweb across my entire life, revealing a picture so ugly, so completely alien, I still can't quite wrap my head around the fact that it was real. What I found didn't just break my heart. It basically vaporized the reality I'd spent 8 years carefully building, cherishing, and trusting. So, the phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was this low hum that just cut right through the quiet of our sleeping house. His phone, not mine. I remember my hand reaching for it, almost like I was on autopilot, you know? Half asleep, probably expecting a late work email, a sports alert, something totally boring. But the message that lit up the screen? It wasn't for him. Not really. Or maybe it was for a version of him I had no idea even existed. My heart didn't just pound. It felt like it seized up, this painful, stuttering beat in my chest as I read the words. Words that were so incredibly wrong, so out of place in our life, they felt like some kind of cruel joke. Words that, in an instant, started to shatter the world I thought I knew, the man I thought I loved. Before that night, our life, or what I thought our life was, it was good. Not just good, but, you know, the kind of good you see in those annoyingly perfect magazine photos. We had the charming little house, the one with the slightly overgrown garden I was always meaning to get to. We had inside jokes that could make us laugh until our sides ached, those comfortable silences that just spoke of a deep understanding. Friday nights were always cheap pizza and expensive wine. 8 years. 8 years of building, of loving, of weaving our lives together so completely that I honestly couldn't tell where I ended and he began. Mark, that was his name. Still is, I guess. Funny how a name can go from being a comfort, like a favorite song, to something that tastes like ash in your mouth. He was, I thought, my rock. The calm, steady one to my more, let's call it creatively chaotic personality. He remembered birthdays, anniversaries, how I liked my coffee, even my silly fears of spiders and public speaking. He'd hold my hand on planes when there was turbulence, even though his own knuckles were white. He'd listen, really listen, when I'd ramble on about my day, my frustrations, my dreams. Or at least, that's what I believed. We met in such a ridiculous way, at a friend's absolutely disastrous karaoke party. He was butchering Bohemian Rhapsody, hilariously off-key. But I was captivated by how he didn't care, how he could just laugh at himself. That became one of the things I loved most about him, what seemed like his total authenticity, his easygoing nature. He just seemed so transparent, so real. No airs, no pretenses. He was just Mark. My Mark. Our friends used to call us the stable ones. The couple that proved true love wasn't just some fairy tale. We talk about the future, not in big, dramatic statements, but in these quiet, confident whispers, a bigger house someday, maybe getting a dog, all the places we wanted to travel when we retired. It all felt so real, like a shimmering path laid out right in front of us. The trust one had in him wasn't just a feeling, it was the foundation of my entire existence. It was absolute, unquestioning. The kind of trust that lets you be your most vulnerable self because you feel completely safe. I'd handed him my heart, my future, all my deepest secrets, believing they were safe. Believing we were safe. Looking back now, it's almost physically painful to remember that version of us, that version of me. The naivety is just suffocating. Were there signs? The logical part of my brain, the part that spent countless nights since then sifting through every single memory, every shared glance, every half-finished sentence, just screams that there must have been. The human mind is a master of self-deception, isn't it? We see what we want to see. And I desperately wanted to see a perfect, loving partnership. So that's exactly what I saw. Any tiny flicker of doubt, any little inconsistency, I just brushed it aside, explained it away, or absorbed it into the bigger story of how happy we were. He was working late more often, sure, but his project was demanding. He was a bit more guarded with his phone, true, but who wasn't these days? These were just life things. Normal. Or so I kept telling myself. Because the alternative? That was just too monstrous to even consider. The idea that the life I was living, the love I was cherishing, was all built on a foundation of lies. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? That the person sleeping right next to you every night could be a complete stranger. A carefully constructed illusion. 2:13 a.m. Those numbers on the clock, they seemed to glow with this almost evil intensity. Mark was asleep beside me, his breathing deep and even. That sound used to bring me so much comfort, but now it just seemed to mock the horror that was starting to dawn on me. His phone, which was usually on silent, had vibrated just once on the nightstand before the screen lit up. I don't know why I looked. Was it instinct? Some kind of tremor in the universe? Or maybe, just maybe, some deeply buried part of me already knew something was terribly wrong. The message was from a name I didn't recognize. Still awake? Can't stop thinking about last night. You were amazing. Zoxo, Sarah. Sarah. Who on earth was Sarah? My mind raced, trying to place the name. A colleague? An old friend I'd forgotten? But the tone. Last night. Amazing. The Zoxo. This wasn't a work colleague. This wasn't some innocent message. This was something else. Something that had absolutely no place in our bed, in our life. My blood ran cold, then hot, then cold again. My hands started to shake, a tremor that began in my fingertips and just spread up my arms. I remember staring at the screen, the words blurring, then sharpening with this horrible clarity. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. I couldn't breathe. It was like an invisible fist had clenched around my lungs, my heart, my throat. Disbelief was the first thing that hit me. This had to be a mistake. A wrong number. Some cruel prank. Anything but the truth that was screaming at me from that glowing screen. I looked over at Mark. His face, usually so open and familiar, now seemed like a mask. Who was this man lying next to me? The man I'd shared my body, my dreams, my deepest fears with for nearly a decade. Could he really be capable of this? The thought itself felt like a betrayal of everything I believed in, everything we had built. But the message was still there. Undeniable. Sarah. Last night. Amazing. Slowly, my fingers feeling clumsy and numb, I touched the screen. I know I shouldn't have. I know that. It was an invasion of his privacy, a line I'd never, ever thought I'd cross. But the need to know, this desperate, clawing need to understand what this all meant, it was overwhelming. It was a compulsion, like picking at a wound even when you know it's only going to make it hurt more. His phone was unlocked. He never usually left it unlocked. Another one of those tiny details that, looking back, just screamed of carelessness, or maybe an arrogance I hadn't seen before. I navigated to his messages, and there she was. Sarah. Not just one message, but a whole thread. A long, sickening thread that stretched back for weeks, even months. Messages filled with laughter, inside jokes that weren't ours, plans for secret meetings, and affirmations of affection that just made my stomach churn. Each message was like a hammer blow, chipping away at the foundation of our life. Can't wait to see you. You make me feel alive. He has no idea. That last one. He has no idea. Except he was me. I was the he. The clueless, trusting fool. The shock was so physical. I felt nauseous, dizzy. The room seemed to tilt, the shadows in the corners deepening, swirling around me. This wasn't just a flotation. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a relationship. A whole parallel life. Those hours between that first horrifying discovery and the gray light of dawn were just a blur of sickening revelations and a dread that kept building. I didn't sleep. How could I? I just sat there on the cold bathroom floor, Mark's phone clutched in my trembling hand, scrolling, reading, each new message a fresh stab of pain. It felt like I was an archaeologist, unearthing some buried city of deceit, layer by painstaking layer. The messages with Sarah were just the tip of the iceberg. It turned out Sarah was his main, well, extracurricular activity. But as I dug deeper, driven by this morbid, self-destructive curiosity, I found more. Not just messages. Emails. Hidden folders in his cloud storage. A separate calendar app I'd never even known existed, filled with cryptic appointments, client dinner, late project, gym, Sarah, weekend conference, not really. The sheer scale of his deception was breathtaking. It wasn't just a secret, it was an entire infrastructure of lies. There were photos. Photos of him with her, laughing, holding hands, looking at each other with an intimacy that was just a twisted parody of the way he used to look at me. They were in places I recognized, that little bistro we liked, the park where we'd had our first picnic. He was taking her into our world, contaminating our memories with his betrayal. And then there were photos and places I didn't recognize, suggesting trips, weekends away that he'd passed off as work commitments or solo hiking trips to clear his head. The financial deception was a whole other layer. Credit card statements I'd never seen, for an account I didn't even know he had. Dinners, hotel rooms, gifts. Money that should have been going towards our shared future, siphoned off to fund this other existence. Each transaction was a small, sharp betrayal, a testament to how calculated his lies were. My mind was reeling, trying to reconcile the man I knew, or thought I knew, with this deceitful stranger. Every memory from the past few months, even years, started to warp and reconfigure itself under this horrifying new light. His late nights at work? His sudden need for space? Those unexplained silences, the subtle shifts in his affection I dismissed as stress or just him being tired. They all clicked into place with sickening precision. I felt like such an idiot. How could I have been so blind? So trusting? The questions just looped endlessly in my head, a torturous soundtrack to the horror that was unspooling. I replayed conversations, searching for the cues I'd missed, the subtle tells. That time he'd been so vague about a weekend, work trip, the way he'd jump if I walked in while he was on his phone. The sudden password protection on everything. Little things, dismissed at the time, now loomed large, like giant signposts on the road to this devastation. The weight of his secrets he'd carried for so long, had finally exploded, and I was standing right in the epicenter of the blast. The more I uncovered, the more my world fractured. It wasn't just about the infidelity, it was about the complete annihilation of trust, the horrifying realization that the life I had invested so much of myself into was a meticulously constructed lie. He hadn't just cheated on me, he had cheated me out of my own reality, my own history. Our history. Who was he? And, even more terrifyingly, who was I, if the very bedrock of my life was this unstable? I remember feeling this profound sense of unreality, like I was watching a particularly cruel movie, not actually living it. There was this strange detachment mixed with the overwhelming pain, a sense of floating above myself, observing this woman hunched on the bathroom floor, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and a dawning, terrible understanding. The sun began to rise, casting this sickly yellow glow through the bathroom window. The birds started their morning chorus, completely oblivious to the wreckage of my inner world. I felt an almost physical revulsion at the thought of facing him, of having to pretend that everything was normal when my entire universe had just been upended. But I knew I couldn't avoid it. A confrontation was inevitable. The truth, no matter how ugly, had to be faced. The phone felt so heavy in my hand, no longer just a piece of technology, but a Pandora's box that had unleashed a swarm of demons into my life. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that nothing would ever be the same again. The carefully painted backdrop of our life had been ripped away, revealing a dark and treacherous landscape behind it. I started to think about the logistics of it all. The sheer effort involved in maintaining such a complex web of deceit. The constant vigilance, the compartmentalization. It was exhausting just to contemplate. How could someone live like that? How could you live like that? The loving partner, the dependable friend I thought I knew. Was he just an act? A role he played when he was with me? The thought made me feel physically ill. And Sarah, who was she? Did she know about me? The messages suggested she did, at least to some extent. Was she a victim too, fed a different set of lies? Or was she a willing participant in this whole charade? The anger I felt towards Mark was like a roaring inferno, But there was also this confused, secondary anger towards this faceless woman who had helped destroy my life. As the house began to stir, the normal sounds of a weekday morning started filtering in. The distant rumble of the coffee machine Mark always set on a timer. The creak of the floorboards as he moved around upstairs, each sound was like a fresh torment. How could he just wake up and go about his day, as if nothing was amiss? As if he wasn't living a lie that was, right at that very moment, tearing my world apart? The sheer audacity of it was staggering. The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself, but in every shared moment, every loving gesture that had now been tainted, revealed as just a potential performance. I waited until he was dressed, sipping his coffee in the kitchen, the absolute picture of domestic normalcy. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clench them into fists just to stop the tremor. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I walked into the kitchen, his phone held out in front of me like a piece of damning evidence, which, of course, it was. "Mark," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady, though it felt like it was being ripped from my throat. "We need to talk." He looked up, a slight frown creasing his brow, the kind of look he'd give if I'd said the milk was off. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice laced with that familiar, easygoing tone that now felt like a calculated mockery. I placed the phone on the counter between us. The screen lit up with one of the more explicit message exchanges with Sarah. "Who is she, Mark?" The change in his expression was instant and horrifying. That easygoing mask just slipped, replaced by a flicker of, was it fear? Guilt? Surprise at being caught? It was there and gone in a second, quickly shuttered, but I saw it. He looked at the phone, then at me, and for a moment, he actually tried to bluff. "What are you talking about? Whose phone is that?" A weak, pathetic attempt. "It's your phone, Mark. And this is Sarah. Or one of them. I'm still trying to get a clear count." The sarcasm just dripped from my words, sharp and acidic. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched out between us, thick and suffocating. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the phone as if it were some venomous snake. That silence? That was his confession. So, I pressed, a cold fury building inside me, a stark contrast to the trembling that still racked my body. Nothing to say? After 8 years, this is it? This is what my life, has been. He finally looked up, and the man I saw was a stranger. His face was pale, his eyes shifty. The confidence, that easy charm, all gone. He looked diminished, small. It's not what you think," he stammered. The classic, pathetic line of the guilty. "Oh, I think I have a pretty clear idea of what it is," I retorted, my voice rising despite my best efforts to keep it controlled. "It's a lie, Mark. Our entire life has been a lie. You've been living a double life, haven't you?" And then it all came tumbling out. Not in a rush, not in some torrent of remorse, but in a hesitant, stumbling series of admissions, dragged out of him piece by painful piece. Yes, there was Sarah. They'd been seeing each other for nearly a year. It started as a flirtation at work, he said, an escape from the pressures at home, pressures, by the way, that I wasn't even aware existed because he'd never bothered to communicate them. He tried to minimize it, to frame it as something that just happened. But I'd seen the messages, the planning, the sheer premeditation. This didn't just happen. This was a series of deliberate choices made over and over and over again. The kitchen, once the warm heart of our home, felt like a sterile interrogation room. Every word he spoke was a fresh betrayal, a new layer of deceit peeled back. He confessed to other indiscretions, as he called them, even before Sarah. Shorter affairs, casual encounters. The scale of it was sickening. It wasn't just one mistake, it was a pattern, a lifestyle. I asked him why. The question that had been screaming in my head for hours. His answers were a pathetic jumble of excuses and self-pity. He felt trapped. He was bored. He wanted to feel desired. He never meant to hurt me. Each excuse felt like a slap in the face. He was painting himself as some kind of victim of his own weaknesses, while I was the one whose world was literally imploding. The emotional storm inside me was immense. Rage, disgust, a profound, soul-crushing sadness. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to physically lash out at this man who had so casually, so cruelly, dismantled my life. But a strange, icy calm had settled over me. It was the calm of pure shock, of realizing that the person you loved, the life you cherished, simply didn't exist in the way you believed it did. Did you ever love me, Mark? I asked, the question just hanging heavy in the air. Or was that a lie too? He actually had the gall to look wounded. Of course, I loved you. I still do. His words felt so hollow, insulting. How could he claim to love me while systematically betraying me on such a profound level? His love was a poisoned chalice. The confrontation wasn't a single, explosive event. It was a drawn-out, agonizing process that spanned hours. There were tears, mostly mine, though he managed a few crocodile tears when he realized the extent of the damage he'd caused, or perhaps just the extent of the trouble he was in. There were moments of stunned silence, where the sheer weight of his betrayal just hung in the air, too heavy to bear. He begged for forgiveness, swore it would never happen again, promised to do anything to fix it. But how do you fix something that has been shattered into a million irreparable pieces? How do you rebuild trust when its very foundations have been revealed as quicksand? I looked at him, really looked at him, and I didn't recognize the man I had spent 8 years of my life with. He was a stranger, wearing the face of my beloved, and the love I had felt for him, so strong and unwavering just hours before, was curdling into something cold and hard. The climax wasn't some shouted resolution. It was the quiet, devastating realization that the man I married was a figment of my imagination, and the life we shared was nothing more than a meticulously crafted illusion. The truth was out, and it was uglier than anything I could have ever conceived. The hours and days that followed the confrontation were just a disorienting haze of pain, confusion, and an exhaustion so profound it felt like it was in my bones. It was as if the world had tilted on its axis, and I was struggling to find my footing on some alien landscape. The shattering wasn't just a metaphor. It was a visceral, physical sensation. I felt broken, fragmented, like a dropped vase whose pieces could never quite fit back together in the same way. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of raw, unfiltered emotion. One moment I'd be consumed by this white-hot rage, replaying his lies, his excuses, the casual cruelty of his deception. I'd pace the house like a caged animal, wanting to scream, to break things, to somehow externalize the storm that was raging inside me. The next, I'd be drowning in a tidal wave of grief. Grief for the relationship I thought we had, grief for the future we'd planned, grief for the naive, trusting person I used to be. That person was gone, and I mourned her loss so acutely. Sleep became an elusive enemy. When I did manage to drift off, exhausted by the emotional onslaught, I was plagued by nightmares, vivid, disturbing replays of his betrayal, of finding those messages, of his face morphing into that of a stranger. I'd wake up with my heart pounding, drenched in a cold sweat, the reality of my situation crashing down on me all over again. The house, once our sanctuary of shared memories and comfortable routines, became a museum of pain. Every object, every photograph, every corner held a memory that was now tainted by his deceit. The coffee mug he used every morning, the armchair where he'd read, the bed we'd shared, they all just screamed of his betrayal. I started to feel like a ghost in my own home, haunting the remnants of a life that was no longer real. I replayed everything, every interaction, every trip, every shared laugh, searching for the red flags I'd so obviously missed. It was a form of self-torture, this obsessive forensic analysis of our past. Had any of it been real? Or was I simply an unwitting actor in his long-running play? The questioning of my own judgment was relentless. How could I have been so easily fooled? Was I that naive? That unobservant? This created such a profound identity crisis. If my understanding of the most intimate part of my life was so completely wrong, what else was I wrong about? The sense of isolation was crushing. Who could I possibly talk to about this? How could I articulate the sheer magnitude of this betrayal without sounding completely unhinged? Our friends, our families, they all saw us as the perfect couple. The thought of shattering their illusions, of admitting the absolute failure of our relationship, was almost as painful as the betrayal itself. For a while, I carried the secret alone, a heavy, toxic burden that just weighed me down. Mark was still in the house, a constant, unbearable reminder of the devastation. We moved like ghosts around each other, the silence thick with unspoken accusations and a grief so profound it was almost tangible. He made these tentative attempts at reconciliation, spewing apologies and promises he couldn't possibly keep, or that I no longer had any capacity to believe. His presence was a torment. Each glance, each word, felt like picking at a raw wound. I found myself staring in the mirror, trying to recognize the person looking back at me. Her eyes were hollow, ringed with dark circles. Her face was pale, etched with lines of stress and sorrow that just hadn't been there before. This experience wasn't just changing my life. It was changing me, carving away at my resilience, my optimism, my very sense of self. The simplest tasks felt monumental. Eating was a chore. Focusing on work was impossible. The world outside my window seemed to continue on, completely oblivious to my personal cataclysm, which only amplified my sense of alienation. I felt adrift, unmoored, like a ship without a rudder in a raging storm. The trust that had been the bedrock of my existence was gone. Not just trust in him, but trust in my own perceptions, trust in the possibility of genuine connection. It was a terrifying void. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something other than pain began to emerge. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was this cold, hard anger that was, in its own way, clarifying. An anger at him for his selfishness and his cruelty. An anger at myself for my blindness. But also, a dawning realization that I couldn't stay in this state of suspended animation, drowning in his mess. The shattering had happened. The pieces of my life, my heart, my identity were scattered all over the place. But they were still my pieces. And eventually, I would have to decide what to do with them. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where your world was turned upside down by a discovery like this, or if you're grappling with the complexities of trust and betrayal in relationships, please know you're not alone. Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Sometimes, just knowing others understand can make a huge difference. And if this story resonates with you, maybe consider subscribing for more narratives about navigating life's unexpected challenges. The decision to end the marriage wasn't some single, dramatic moment, but more of a slow, agonizing crawl out of the wreckage. There was no easy path to fixing what Mark had broken. Trust, once it's been completely annihilated, is an incredibly difficult thing to resurrect. His promises felt empty, his apologies totally self-serving. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by this deceitful stranger, and I realized I couldn't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if the person beside me was real or just another performance. Asking him to leave was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Not because I wanted him to stay, not anymore, but because it signified the definitive end of a chapter, the final, irreversible admission that our life together was well and truly over. The house felt impossibly empty after he left, yet paradoxically, I could actually breathe again. The oppressive weight of his presence, his lies, was finally lifted. The weeks and months that followed were a journey through a landscape of grief and rebuilding. Some days were a struggle just to get out of bed. Other days, I found a surprising resilience I didn't even know I possessed. I leaned heavily on a few close friends, the ones I finally confided in. Their support was an absolute lifeline, a reminder that genuine connection and loyalty still existed in the world. Talking about it, actually saying the ugly truths out loud, began to rob them of some of their power. Therapy became my anchor, a safe space where I could unravel the tangled knot of emotions, the anger, the sadness, the lingering disbelief, the crippling self-doubt. My therapist helped me understand that his choices were about him, his failings, his brokenness, not a reflection of my worth. It was a slow process, learning to detangle my identity from the wreckage of our relationship, learning to trust my own judgment again. There were good days and bad days. Days when a song on the radio, a familiar scent, or a chance encounter with a mutual acquaintance would send me spiraling right back into the pain. And then there were days when I felt a flicker of my old self, a spark of hope, a glimpse of a future that wasn't defined by his betrayal. Rebuilding my life meant creating new routines, new memories, reclaiming spaces that had been tainted by him. I redecorated the bedroom, painted the kitchen a bright, cheerful color. I started hiking, something Mark had always claimed to love but had clearly just used as a cover for his deceptions. I found a quiet joy in solitary walks, in the beauty of nature, in simply being in my own company. The legal process of divorce was draining, another layer of pain and bureaucracy piled on top of the emotional devastation. But with each signed paper, each step towards formalizing our separation, I felt a small piece of myself being reclaimed. Healing, I've learned, is not a linear process. There are still moments, even now, when a shadow of the past falls over me. A pang of sadness for the life I thought I had. A flicker of anger at the years lost to his deceit. But those moments are fewer now, and less intense. The raw, gaping wound has slowly, painstakingly, begun to scar over. It's a scar I will always carry, a reminder of the pain, yes, but also a testament to my survival. What did I learn from all this? I learned that trust is a fragile, precious thing, so easily broken and incredibly hard to mend. I learned that sometimes the people we love the most are capable of unimaginable deception. I learned that my own intuition, that nagging little voice I had silenced for so long, is usually right. And most importantly, I learned that I am so much stronger than I ever thought possible. I faced the absolute shattering of my world, and I am still standing. I am rebuilding, piece by piece, a life that is authentically mine, built on a foundation of truth and self-respect. The future is no longer a clearly defined path shared with another. It's more like an open landscape, full of uncertainty, yes, but also full of possibility. The betrayal changed me, undoubtedly. I'm more cautious now, perhaps a little more cynical. But I'm also more self-aware, more resilient, and more determined than ever to live a life filled with honesty and genuine connection. The hidden life my partner led shattered everything I thought was real, but in picking up the pieces, I began to find something even more valuable, myself. The journey from that 2 a.m. notification to where I am today has been, without a doubt, the hardest of my life. Discovering a partner's hidden life isn't just about dealing with infidelity. It's about grieving a reality that never truly existed and somehow finding the strength to redefine your own. It's a profound and incredibly painful unraveling, but it can also be a path to uncovering your own resilience and the possibility of a new beginning, one built entirely on your own terms. The scars are still there, but they tell a story of survival and ultimately of reclaiming your own truth. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If this resonated with you in any way, please give the video a like and maybe subscribe for more content. If you have a story of your own or thoughts on navigating betrayal and rebuilding, please feel free to share them respectfully in the comments. Your voice really does matter, and your story could be the lifeline someone else needs to hear. Take care of yourselves and always be true to yourselves.